And we get liftoff. So I'm once again joined by Blackbird, and Brizer may be coming along very soon. This time around, we're going to review a movie called Capricorn 1. Now, I had never heard of this movie. Brizer recommended it to me about a month ago. Last weekend, I got around to watching it, and I found it exceedingly interesting. It's from 1978. It was directed by Peter Hyams, and it stars a number of actors. Some of them you may know, some of them you may not. One of them certainly sticks out, and that's O.J. Simpson, the Juice. He was in this movie. So yeah, it stars Elliot Gould, James Brolin, Brenda Vaccaro, Sam Waterston, Hal Holbrook, Karen Black, and many, many more. We're not going to go through all the characters. There are so many characters in this film. We're going to try and keep this review to about 55 minutes. I will bring in Blackbird here to give his initial thoughts, and then we'll very quickly just go through the different sections of the film. So Blackbird, how are you? And when did you first watch this movie? What were your first impressions then? Have you rewatched it recently? Do you have different impressions now, etc.?
Greetings. Thanks for having me on for this review of Capricorn 1. And in full disclosure, I am one of those children of the space age. I was born in 1962, actually at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico, where the Mercury project started, right? My father he was one of those people who, after Pearl Harbor, lied about his age to join the military to go fight the ultimate evil, right? And then he stayed in the military, went from the Navy into the Army Air Corps, then to the Air Force, and he was being fast-tracked into the space program. And of course, everybody remembers John Kennedy's, challenge to the American people that we were going to build the pyramids, and by way of going to the moon within a decade, right? So, that's the backdrop of how I'm seeing this. And my father, was he was so proud of being part of the space program, and rightfully so, because that was when it was still based on science. And he was actually part of the honor guard. Part of his jobs was training the chimpanzees in the Mercury program, especially Ham and Enos, right? The ones who actually went into space. And then he was part of the honor guard that presented Ham to President Johnson at the National Zoo, because they'd made this special enclosure for the hero space chimp, Ham. And, so that's, his laurels and everything. That was an incredible thing from a country boy from Wilkes County, North Kakalaki. And, so I was brought in with, the space program's completely legit. We rock, and when this film came out in 78, it was, we can see the corruptibility of the system, but it's the space program is still legit, but we can see that the powers that be are completely corrupt and have lost vision of the Great Republic, right? And Kennedy's vision, etc. And so it was interesting how this movie was reviewed when I saw it in the theaters in the 70s, along with all the other, Hollywood sci-fi dystopian films. And so one of the themes, just then, watching it again yesterday, was quite the eye-opener to watch it with these eyes. And of course, I watched it around 2008 when I was beginning to question the space program. And so yesterday, one of the things that just really struck me was, how big of a meta push at the meta level, the subtext in all of these Hollywood films was the good old boy network is bad. All that white Gentile WASP culture, that is completely corrupted. The real heroes of the new America are, of course, the Jewish intellectuals portrayed by the young Jewish scientist at NASA who figures out the scam but is, punished for his efforts. And then, of course, the Elliot Gould, Jimmy Olsen reporter on the spot, that's going to follow the story for the good of everything, right? And challenge the powers and be. So he's like the Woodward and Bernstein type character, right? And then you see they originally wanted Candice Bergen to play the tough female Lois Lane reporter, that's also the total feminist, tearing down the good old boy network, and then you have the astronauts, and of course you have the alpha male astronaut, then you have the beta first mate, kind of guy, and then you have the token black guy. And I had completely forgotten that O.J. Simpson was in this film, so that did not age well as the black astronaut, right? And so you just see that was to me the takeaway of just tearing down this system of the good old boy network, and this idea of exposing the space program, the most noble thing ever, as being completely corrupted by white male interests, right? So that's kind of like before we break that down, let's just look at the big picture. And just so many of those films at that time were about that. They were targeted to basically demoralize, the American public, the white population in general, that y'all are bad. And somehow, now the heroes are always these young, vibrant Jews, right? So I just, that's just kind of my initial take. So I'll back to you.
Yeah, affirmative action wasn't very strong back then because the O.J. Simpson character, I think he was the last one to touch down on Martian soil. I'll bring in Brizer. He should be there now. Brizer, how are you? You put me onto this film. When was the first time you watched it, and what were your first impressions?
Yeah, hi guys. Sorry for my late arrival there. Yeah, I watched this a long time ago as well. Probably back in the early 2000s, and I thought it was just very interesting how this was released not too long after the so-called Apollo missions to the moon, and the way they just showed how easy it is to fake something like this, And then, of course, I watched it again about a month or two ago. That's when I put you onto it betwixt, and again, watching it again now, you kind of just see, how easy it is to do something like this. Like it kind of reminds me a bit of like Wag the Dog again, just creating a scenario, putting it out there, everybody buying into it. Look, we went to the moon. We went to go to Mars, and how wonderful all is. We're all waving the flags and all this kind of stuff. And the guys were just totally, the astronauts didn't even know about it. They were kind of just about to get into the rocket, so to speak. And then they were said, "Oh, you got to come out here, guys, and you ain't going anywhere." And then realizing that they were actually fall guys anyway, that they were going to kill them one way or the other. And I just thought, and it reminded me of the time, I don't know, you guys have seen the video of, Armstrong, Aldrin and Glenn when they allegedly came back from the moon, and they did a press conference. I mean, you would think after accomplishing a feat like that they would be, pardon the pun, over the moon about this, They would be elated. They'd be couldn't wait to tell their story in front of the whole world, that we went there. And the three guys were just sitting there, and it was like you could tell just by the body language and how they were speaking that something's not right here. A gun was put to their head and told you just go along with this or else. We know where your family lives. We know you. We'll deal with you if you don't go along with this program. And the same kind of thing happened in this movie as well. And yeah, it just shows you how easy it is to pull off a stunt like this, you know, and how you can fool the whole world. And again, we saw it in the last few years, how they fooled the whole world over a scamdemic, over nothing, and everybody fell for it. And all you need is your media people on board and the whole thing, and anybody who tries to expose it or call it out for what it is are done away with, or silenced, or cancelled, or whatever. So yeah, that's my initial impressions. I thought it was a very good film. The way they led into it, particularly in the first half of the movie, and then of course the second half was when the guys escaped, and you know, the black helicopters come after them to try and catch them. You know, but the guy wins the day. One of the astronauts survives, obviously, and he obviously gets to tell his story. Though we don't know what happens there, but I just thought it was a good film just to kind of really expose like this whole moon landing thing, because as far as I'm concerned, it was a big hoax as well. I don't think that we ever went to the moon at all, and I don't think we could even ever get there. I mean, I've seen pictures of the so-called Mars kind of lunar module that allegedly went to Mars, and they showed a picture of the surface of Mars, and then somebody put it up to me and showed there's a place in betwixt a place called the Burren in County Clare, which is this limestone kind of big limestone area. It looks like the surface of what we call the moon, right? It looks something like that.
You call it a karst landscape.
Karst landscape, yeah. And it was the exact same picture. You know, it was the exact same picture. And I believe they've done that with other places. There's other places in the world where they've done exactly that. They've taken a picture of somewhere, some desert area somewhere, and said, "Oh, look, there we are on Mars or wherever," you know, and it's completely fake. And it just shows you how they can do this and pull this off, you know. So that's my initial take, anyway.
All right, cheers, Brizer. Just to let you know, Brizer, there's some electrical interference coming in on your end. It seems to be fluctuating, so I don't know if there's something close to your computer that's charging or something. I don't know, but it's not too bad. But just letting you know, right? So yeah, the film starts off, and all systems are go. These three astronauts are, they've passed all their strenuous exams and they're going to new frontiers. They're going to Mars, and you've got all these spectators, well-to-do people with binoculars, and the president doesn't turn up. The vice president does turn up, and the head of NASA, he's not very enthused by this, because he thinks the president should be there, and it gives him the impression that the government is probably not going to offer much investment into the space program. So everyone, apart from the top brass at NASA, they believe that these three astronauts are going to Mars. The astronauts believe they're going to Mars. All the people at ground control, working away on the computers, looking at the big screen, looking at graphs, looking at tables, they all believe they're going to Mars. And I thought this was very good, because where you have ground control, more or less these people, these well-educated mathematicians, physicists, essentially they are chimpanzees on typewriters. They don't realize they're chimpanzees on typewriters, but they're chimpanzees on typewriters. The ground control is really just, I wouldn't say it's a data generating center. They receive the data from somewhere else, but they believe that this is real-time data coming through, and it's all about where the rocket is and air pressure and temperature and all this sort of stuff. But it's very good, and as Brizer said, it goes to show us how easily the media can, pretend that some great event has taken place or is taking place, and they can produce reams and reams of data. And I think that's why many of us were surprised at the start of this pandemic to see people whom we considered to be very intelligent falling for it hook, line, and sinker. And they fell for it because the media was constantly producing graphs, constantly producing case numbers. And once the data is produced, they'll lap it up, So, yeah, I think it's very good in that way. And the rocket, it does take off, but the astronauts are not in the rocket. They've been whisked off to some compound somewhere, and I think their superior, he tries to butter them up, saying how great they are, and he remembers the first time they came in to train, and they're like sons to him. And when he realizes that he hasn't really bowled them over with this, he then mentions, as Brizer said, he mentions their families, but he just says your families. And they're like, well, wait a minute, you said our families, what are you talking about? And he's like, oh, come on, my neck is in a noose as well, whatever. And then he tells them that all their families are on a plane, and if they don't go along with it, that plane is going to be blown to smithereens or something like that. So the astronauts have to make a decision. Are they going to go along with this? Because they're still needed. They're in it's like a movie studio, and they're going to have to pretend that they're on Mars, and they might have to do some audio as well, and all the rest of it. So I'll pass it back on to Blackbird. You can bring this anywhere if you want to mention other parts of the film, if you want to flesh it out, etc. Go ahead.
Oh, great points there. And the only thing I think I would add is I was just kept getting hit with images of the Werewolf Mafia game that, if you're not familiar with the game, it's basically this idea of you have an informed minority, an in-group that know who each other are, and they're playing a false role. They're playing a predatory role and to all the other people, and so the villagers, right? And so in this werewolf game, you have a informed minority preying on an uninformed majority. And like you said, the scientists, the best minds we could produce were just little, monkeys on typewriters, analyzing the data they've been fed by this informed minority. It says we can manipulate whatever we want, and you're our experts that are going to back us up when we go to present it to the rest of the uninformed majority who actually think they're informed, right? But they don't have a clue what's really going on. They're watching the stagecraft. So this is the idea of smoke and mirrors, as they say. This isn't real science. This is deception at this point. And the idea of they're in the spacecraft, and suddenly the hatch opens again, and it's a guy in a suit saying, come with me immediately, there's no time to explain, and with the implied, if you don't, I will force you kind of thing. So they get in, they get whisked off, flown out into the middle of nowhere to an abandoned military base, and realize that it's been rigged up to be a soundstage for a movie production of them going to Mars, right? And like you said, they try with the carrot first that, you got to take one for the team here, you got to just, chin up and all that, this for thing. And when that doesn't work, then it's the stick of, all your families are on the same plane, and we just happen to have an explosive device. And so you either agree to go along with this, or your family is going to die in a horrible accident. And so this is that gangland mentality of realpolitik power. And so this is the idea of, this is the real power in America exercising. You go along with us, or we will kill you and your family. So that's immediately the first setup of this. And like you were saying, the part of the space program was just how much money was borrowed from the Federal Reserve at interest and then funneled into all of these military contractors to create what we call the space program. And so it was just, a gravy train of the 60s and 70s. And, a lot with those, what they call it, pork barrel. So a lot of people were getting really rich and they wanted the space program to continue, but the public was turning against it because they thought money should be spent at home rather than continuing to fund these, military space contractors. So anyway, back to you.
Yeah, just to say as well that this thing of everyone, everyone being in the dark, but thinking that they're at the forefront of something marvelous. I've spoken in the last couple of years, I've spoken to a few doctors who worked in hospitals, etc. And they believed there was a pandemic. And if you ask them why they believe this, they said because the hospitals were full of people. The hospitals were full, even though they work in a different department. As far as they know, there was a pandemic because lots of people came into the hospital. Right, I'll pass it on now to Brizer. Brizer, what would you like to add? Go ahead.
Yeah, there's there's a lot of people are now questioning these moon landings, whether they happen or not. And again, I just thought it was very interesting that this movie was made in the mid-70s, not long after all of this. Again, they're telling us that this was all staged, pretty much. But instead of going to the moon, we're going to Mars, a manned mission to Mars, right? So, and it's oh, hang on. It's kind of oh, hang on. I've just lost my train of thought there. Yeah, going back to again NASA and all the rest of it. How they, back in those days, it was in the middle of the Cold War. Allegedly the Russians put the first man in space, which is Yuri Gagarin, I believe, and then so the Americans had to go one better. And you have to wonder, like, what was this all about, really? And why were, as Blackbird said, why were they spending billions of dollars even back then to pull off something like this, and pretty much an elaborate hoax, And it just kind of just shows you what's the mindset of these people who are pulling this off. Like, what was the gain out of this? Because I don't think people would have been too concerned whether we went to the moon or not. People look outside at night time and they see this thing up in the sky and it's called the moon, and think, I'm sure a lot of people thought, wonder what it was like up there. Could we ever get up there? And so it was something like, say, yeah, we can do this. We're amazing. As human beings, we're amazing. We can go to these far-flung places, up there in outer space somewhere, and we can land a craft on it, and people can walk around up there. Yes, they're going to have breathing equipment and all the rest of it, and it's just there's a theory going about that Stanley Kubrick, when he was filming 2001: A Space Odyssey, that at that very same time he was also filming the moon landings as well. Now, I'm not sure how true that is, but I've heard that theory thrown around, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's correct, because Kubrick was into doing things like that, wasn't he? As I say, we've done reviews of Eyes Wide Shut and all that type of thing, and you could see that Kubrick was pushing the envelope quite a lot on these things and exposing a lot of things that were going on in government and in Hollywood, and and we have to question NASA. What is that all about? What is their main function here? And it's obviously a kind of a deep state project, as I say, where billions and billions of dollars or whatever goes into it to fund what exactly. And when I believe it was India there, wasn't it, last year they sent a so-called craft up to the moon. And when I looked at this, I had to laugh because it looked like an Atari computer game from the 80s, like what they showed. I mean, it was laughable. And yet everybody was clapping like seals, thinking, isn't this wonderful? India has sent an unmanned mission to the moon, And it just boggles my mind how simple it is to pull off something like this. And that's what this film did for me. It just showed us straight off, like, how easy it is to do this. All you have to do is, and to do it at the last minute as well, like as they showed in this film, because the astronauts were all ready to go. And then they're just about to get into the rocket and take off, and then they were pulled out and said, sorry guys, can't do it, there's a major defect and we can't, but you're good guys, and we're going to have to, you just have to be part of the plan, say nothing, because as I said, we know where your families are. And that's what they can do. And I'm wondering, is that what's happened during, like, again, the scamdemic, with a lot of doctors, like very well-known doctors out there, who would have seen through this whole scamdemic, right, and would have called it out big time from the beginning. But again, a gun was put to their head and said, if you speak out about this, we're coming after you and your families. Yeah, it shows you the world we're living in. It's a lot of it's all make believe. It's all just to get everyone on board. Let's get people's attention. We need to get people's attention so we can distract them from all these other things that are going on, and give them something to cheer about. Oh, look, we went to the moon. Isn't that amazing? In the meantime, at that time when the alleged moon landings happened, that was in the middle of the Vietnam War. And a lot of people were getting a bit pissed off about that and what was going on, because a lot of young American men were going over to Vietnam alone. We're not coming back. Over what? A war over what? So there was lots of different things. As I said, it was in the middle of the Cold War as well. So let's give people a distraction. Just throw something out there to get them to cheer about. But the fact that they would go to so much trouble to do something like that, and to pull off a scam like that, and then with these guys in this film, the three astronauts literally used them as patsies and killed them off, because they can easily say, well, they were coming back from space and they were going through the atmosphere and the problems happened, and the spacecraft blew up over the ocean. It's not terrible, but they're great American heroes. So this is wonderful, and then everybody will mourn and grieve, and but at least we went to Mars. At least we went to Mars. We got there, We beat those pesky Russians or whoever, It's a crazy world that we're in at the moment, and the fact that they would go to so much trouble to pull off something like this is just, it kind of boggles my mind. But that's that's the world we're living in, and we have to kind of look at things when we see stuff being put out there. We really do have to take a couple of steps back and ask the questions like, okay, you're making a claim, you say you're going somewhere or you're doing something or there's something happening. Well, I want to see proof. I want to see, like, particularly when it came to so COVID nonsense, like, I want to see proof that, that there is an actual pandemic, that there is a so-called virus. I want to see evidence of this. I want to see evidence of contagion. I want to see this. And they never were able to produce this. And so obviously you have to say, well, then if you can't produce the proof, you're obviously lying, because if you had the proof, you'd show us. So they're doing it with everything, whether it's going up into space, whether it's something like, a pandemic or whatever, any kind of thing that's going on, any big issue that's going on in the world right now. I mean, I have to even wonder a question about what's maybe going on in Ukraine at the moment. Is it as bad as we were being told? Because from what I heard in Ukraine, it's only in the eastern part of the country where things are very, very bad. The rest of the country is absolutely fine and people are living as normal. I mean, it's a big country, but we're being told that the poor old Ukrainians, it's terrible and everything like that. But from what I've seen or what I've looked at is that most of the country is quite peaceful and everything's okay. So we just do not know what to believe anymore. And I think, to be skeptical of these things and ask these questions, it kind of, we're kind of taking back power, because these people can tell us whatever they want. But then when we put them, when we put their feet to the fire and say, right, show us your evidence of all of this, and they can't answer, then we can call them out. And we've been doing this with regards to, a certain event in World War II, where allegedly 6 million people died, right? We've been asking the question on that. Well, show us the evidence, and they can't do it. Nobody has done it. David Irving has put it out there. He's even put up 10 grand of his own money and said to all of them, to all the Jewish experts and everything, says, can you show us evidence that gas chambers existed and all the rest of it? And they can't do it. So what else do you expect us to do then? We have to call it out and say, well, obviously it didn't happen then. But then we're labelled as Holocaust deniers, and now we have COVID deniers, climate change deniers, anybody who goes against the narrative. And it's constant, and that's why I'm just saying I'm just stepping away from all of this and letting this nonsense carry. They can say whatever they want, but I'm not playing a part. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going along with this nonsense anymore. I'm done. We went along with it for years and years. We thought that this was real and this was great, and these guys that went to the moon are great heroes, and wow, fantastic, And then, you realize that the whole thing was one big lie. And I have to wonder, what else have they lied to us about, Certain events in history, was it as true as we were told? It's that famous saying, the history books are written by the victors. So they can tell us whatever they want, but then if we dare question it, they kind of come after us and shut us down, cancel us, and even put us into prison. It's madness. So I'll pass it back.
There's a 95-year-old woman who's been in prison for the last few years, and I think it's going to be extended for another couple of years because of words. She used certain words in regard to events in World War II, and they're locking her up. So
is it Ursula Haberback?
Yeah, that tells me that
95 years old. Yeah,
they don't have a very strong case if they must feel very insecure if they have to lock up a 95-year-old grandmother. Yeah. So anyway, I'll go on. The astronauts in this film, when I watched it, I was thinking that their goose was cooked, years back, more or less. They've been trained to be sacrificial lambs for a fake R&D department, and they didn't know it until the very end when they got pulled out of the rocket, and they were more or less told that there is no real space program. So I thought that was very good. Also, there's a worker. One of you already mentioned there's a worker there at ground control, and he's doing the calculations, and some things just aren't working out, and he's a bit of a curious cat, and he decides to run his own program. So he shows initiative, which corporations tell us that's great if you can show initiative. This guy shows initiative, and he asks questions, and that's his undoing really, because he starts digging his own grave. The journalist is a friend of his, and he finds out that worker who told him, I think they were playing pool or something, and the worker told him things weren't adding up, that he got the impression that maybe maybe the astronauts weren't on Mars or on their way to Mars, and that worker disappeared, and then the journalist was driving his car and someone had messed with his brakes and he ends up crashing his car into a river. He escapes, and the state is after him now, after the journalist. The 3 astronauts, they find out that they're told that they're going to be brought to some island and they're going to be put into the rocket that will land. And then their job is then to just climb out of the rocket and celebrate. And they then, I don't know how, but they discover that, and there's been a new twist in the tale, that the news being put out there is that they died on re-entry. Some panel wasn't functioning or had broken off and they were incinerated, and you have the grieving widows and all that. And they're in some room. It's not very secure. They manage to escape quite easily. They get an airplane and they fly off, but they run out of fuel. They land in the desert, and then they go off in 3 different directions. And then you have these helicopters chasing them, these 2 helicopters that keep turning towards each other as if they're, confiding in each other as they hunt them down. They hunt down 2 of them, and one of them manages to escape. The journalist helps him, and some other pilot guy. And at the very end of the film, the protagonist, he turns up for his own funeral, and it feels very much 70s, the way, it's supposed to be slow motion or whatever. He and the journalist are jogging or running towards the funeral, and it looks like they're pretending to be running as they bob up and down. It kind of reminded me of The Bionic Woman, which used to be on Saturday mornings back in the 80s and 90s in Ireland. Yeah, I also thought, Brizer mentioned Ukraine. When I was looking at the 3 astronauts and they're trying to get away from Big Daddy government, it reminded me of those clips we see now of Ukrainian men, maybe in their 50s, being hauled off. It's in a village somewhere in Ukraine, and we're told that they're being hauled off to the meat grinder. So they're being sent off to a certain death, and they're trying to resist, and their wives are trying to resist, the children are trying to resist. I think, I should say as well that at the end of this, or towards the end of this film, when the mainstream media announces that all 3 astronauts have died, but it was not in vain, the shoulders of giants and all that jazz, and they've helped bring space exploration on in leaps and bounds. You do, like, the mainstream media in this case gives closure to the event. And I was thinking of the scamdemic. We were told 2 weeks to flatten the curve, 2 more weeks to flatten the curve. You have to get a vaccine. Oh, you need another vaccine. Oh, you need another one. Oh, you need a booster. And it was on and on and on and on. But there was never a sense of closure. It was never announced, 2 years afterwards, by whatever global leaders. Guys, we did it. We did it. All, the masks, the social distancing, it all helped. We have destroyed the COVID-19 virus. We can now celebrate for all the sacrifices we have made. There was no closure, and I think that's because now they don't respect the public enough to offer them closure. They look upon the public as as animals, more or less, as farm animals. So I think that's all I have to say. I should say that you do get a lot of talk with these space exploration programs of humanity, and we're all one race, the human race, and it leads itself to this idea of one world government. And I think this is another reason why the space race and all that was so important, because it did bring us closer to this idea of a one world government. And I will now pass it on to Blackbird to give more thoughts and his final thoughts. I'll just give my quick rating for this film. I would probably give it 7 out of 10. I think the first hour was wonderful, and then it was dragged out a bit, I thought, after that, the manhunt or menhunt, as it were. So yeah, I'll pass it on to Blackbird to give more analysis and his final thoughts.
Oh, great wrap up of the film and the good points. Here the idea of you got the astronauts in the middle of the desert on the soundstage creating a fake narrative. You've got all of these, best of the best monkeys on typewriters, right, being fed bad data. The one character, Elliot Whitler, who discovers the problem with the latency. And this is, for the newbies, before I got blacklisted, I had a career in engineering, especially telecommunications. And one of the things you have in real-time communications is a thing called latency. The further apart the people are, the more delay there is on the line. And it's like if you have enough latency, it's like when you're on your cell phone, your friend's on their cell phone, you start talking over each other because you're not hearing the spaces like you do if you're just talking to face, right? And satellite phones are worse. And a phone to the moon would be much more latency. And of course, one to Mars would be even more latency. And so this engineer is discovering that, I'm getting signal before I should. It's coming locally. It's not coming from, outer space, etc. And it's one of those fundamental things of physics that this just can't happen. And this is how I was backstage on 9/11 when they were trying to tell me about these magic cell phone calls from these in-flight airlines at 35,000 feet going at this many knots. It's just, that's physically impossible. And then WTC-7 falling in free fall speed, that's physically impossible. Even the World Trade Center is falling at free fall speed. I'm like, that is physically impossible. That can't happen on this planet. And so I just had that sense of, 9/11 was the day that we suspended the laws of physics. It's, suspend the laws of physics day if you want to believe the official 9/11 story, and hence the moon landing story. And in this, the physics, he's like, this just can't happen. And he's trying to explain it to his reporter friend. And then he just gets disappeared. Not only does he, the reporter comes back to the pool table where they're having their drinks. The guy hasn't finished his drinks, but he's just gone. He's not answering his phone. When he goes to his apartment that he's been to for years, it's a completely redecorated apartment. There's a woman living there with backdated magazines, right? So this is blotting out your adversary, that person never existed, never worked at NASA, et cetera, which was that, adding that creep factor. The deep state is able to blot you out, that you never existed. Amalek must be blotted out. And then the idea of the survival situation, the astronauts steal the plane, crash in the desert, and they decide we're going to stick together, we're going to split up. That's big game changer there. Do you stay together or you split up? They decide to split up. And so you see each one of them get captured, except for the captain, the main guy, and he gets rescued by the reporter who has hired a charter plane, a crop duster plane, old biplane, with Telly Savalas as the pilot. And they start following the black helicopters and end up rescuing the surviving astronaut. And this big chase ensues between them and, of course, the black helicopters. And you've got these, military black helicopters with machine guns and rocket launchers, et cetera, going up against this biplane. And the thing is, the biplane pilot, Telly Savalas, has the home court advantage where he knows all of those canyons and basically leads the helicopters into a canyon that he's familiar with. They're not. And then they do the crop dusting to give them a blind out. So this is them using a tactical advantage over a superior adversary, right? And so then, of course, you see the final scene where they're showing up at their own memorial. And I think this is the most cynical thing, is to assassinate these people, basically, that they were expendable, that they're going to be a liability. And so we just have to have them all killed. But we're going to have a memorial and make them heroes. And I noticed little nod to JFK, where they also had an eternal flame at their memorial, like the JFK eternal flame. What a cynical thing to, let somebody assassinate your president, but then, make him a hero. And so these guys are all, considered heroes that died in the line of duty to, advance humanity. And the head of the program, who's the Hal Holbrook guy, he has been grooming this, astronaut entrenched with his family. When he comes over to invite the wife to the memorial service, the kids are calling him Uncle Jim. And, it's just, yes, this is our best friend. He's looking after us. And it's like, this is the man who just had your father killed in the line of duty, and you're calling him Uncle Jim and thinking he's your best friend. And so you see the end where the astronaut is coming up with the reporter to the memorial service. They're saying he's dead. And then you have the irrefutable proof that you cannot deny it. And then the scene of the news cameras panning over and showing the astronaut is still alive. And then you're left to figure out what the fallout would be as this, total house of cards comes crashing down on them. And so this is, that I guess the ultimate in cynicism of that is just to leave you hanging there of thinking the bad guys are somehow going to get their due. And we in the 9/11 truth community have been waiting for the bad guys to get their due for over 2 decades now. It's a long, slow process. But anyway, so yeah, I thought this was probably also about a 7. Ratings, just some good scenes, and the idea of the game theory, especially the car chase or the runaway car scene with the reporter when he's realizing that they are trying to kill him, is just this classic runaway car scene where you can't do anything but hang on. Your car, you can't turn it off. Your gas pedal is stuck. You're accelerating. The brakes don't work. This is that idea of you're now down the rabbit hole. You are you have no control over what's going to happen to you now. So we all think we have control over our lives, and that was just a great way to say, when you challenge this type of shadow power, your life gets thrown into chaos because they're going to come at you every which way. And so your life is just suddenly out of control. And, I lived that when I got blacklisted, and suddenly, it was just, you're in hell. These people, want to silence you, and they're going to destroy your life and make your life miserable any way they can. And, one of the things about the German Stasi, the East German, or the Jewish Stasi, it wasn't German, but, they had this program called Zerstong, which was basically the psychological warfare techniques that the state would go after anybody who was challenging their narrative just like this. And this is the operations they would use to literally, torment you, drive you insane, assassinate you, whatever they needed to do. But, this is, the handbook of the targeted individual. And, Elliot Gould played the targeted individual. So I thought if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out and then start questioning everything. So back to you.
Thanks for that, Blackbird. And I'll pass it on to Brizer. Brizer, you're the one who brought this film to my attention. And what would you like to give as your parting shots for this film?
Yeah, I just... going to what Blackbird said, I just brought up the kind of scene in the movie where the main astronaut, Brubaker, his son, this is when it was before the funeral and all that, and Dr. James Calloway comes around, and so the young guy asks him, he says, "Hey, Uncle Jim," and he goes, "Yeah, my dad went to Mars." And he just went, yes, he did. Instead of like going, yes, he did, he's a great hero and everything, knowing that he could not lie, he realized he was lying to a 5 or 6 year old child. And then again, that reminded me of that press conference with Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, John Glenn, when they were being interviewed by the press after allegedly coming back from the moon. And it was like, you guys went to the moon. And they went, Yeah, yeah, we did. No big deal. Yeah, whatever, you know. And it just shows you like what, um, how, how evil this is to lie to people about stuff, you know. That this is more important. The lie is more important than the truth, and that's the world we're living in right now. The lie is more important. Uh, let's make up whatever lies we want, put it out there on media because we have the media, we control the media. Put out there whatever lies, and to hell with the consequences. And if people die or not, so what? Just collateral damage. Again, that scene Blackbird brought up about the journalist that Elliot Gould played, you know, being in the car, and the car literally, looked like it was controlled. And we've seen that before, haven't we? I think, wasn't there a guy who, I think he worked with Rolling Stone magazine. Okay, that's a very lefty, woke kind of magazine now. But it wasn't he trying to expose something in the CIA, and he was driving back home and the car just totally was taken over remotely, and it just crashed into a tree and burst into flames, and he was gone, you know. And it just shows you again, like if you go up against this system and you're that much of a threat, they will take you out. And because the lie has to continue, it's all about the lie, not the truth. And that's the world we're living in. It's truth doesn't matter. Truth is no defense, as you know, in the famous trial, Ernst Zundel, you know, when he was in Germany, and the judge famously said, you know, that the truth is no defense. So that just shows you where we are in this world right now. And the people who are running the show just keep perpetuating the lie, the lie, the lie. But I think it's all beginning to unravel now, because you can only lie for so long before suddenly the truth starts emerging. And this will all be exposed. I think a lot of the lies that we're seeing now, a lot of people are waking up to the COVID scam, a lot of people are waking up to the events of World War II, different things that have happened in the past, and are questioning it. And I think that's great that to see that, and to see these people like doubling down, you know, and you can see that they're under pressure, because why would they go to so much effort to try and cancel people? Like, why is it when you go on social media to kind of call this out, you get fact checkers coming in and trying to tell you, no, you're wrong, we're right, you're wrong. How dare you question this? And yeah, I thought it was a good movie. I agree with you, Twix. I think the first hour or so I thought was very good. The way it built up, you know, the whole scene where the guys were getting ready to get into the rocket and head off. They were all on board. They said, yeah, this is going to be amazing. They knew that, you know, they were even thinking this is a huge risk. We mightn't come back, but we're ready to go. We trust the science and the experts that we can get there to this place called Mars, and we can land there and we can send back images, and then we'll come back safely home. All, you know, God willing, we'll get back. And the whole nation, the world is behind us here, you know. And that's, I'm sure, how these astronauts during the Apollo missions felt as well. And they were just being used. They were just pawns in a big game. And yeah, that's the world we're in at the moment. And but it's good to see more and more people questioning these events. I know there's more pressing issues going on in the world right now, which we probably need to be more focused on, but just looking at something like the moon landings and questioning how real that was, I think that that's a start, because you can see quite clearly that this was staged, and it could be so easily done in a movie studio in Hollywood or anywhere. And what was it? There was a song, I can't remember the name of the band that did it, but said something like space. Yeah, they say that space is the final frontier, but it was made in a Hollywood basement. I can't remember who sang that. Song called Californication, I think. So space is the final frontier, but it was made in a Hollywood basement. So again, telling us, you know. And I think it's also interesting that there was one point in it which kind of jumped out at me, where is it here now? I have it here. Yeah, where Lieutenant Colonel Peter Willis, played by Sam Waterston, says to Dr. Calloway, says, a funny thing happened on the way to Mars. And then in 2001, a film came out called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. And it was a kind of a conspiracy type film where the guy reckoned that the 6 Apollo missions were all faked, they were all hoaxes. And so obviously the guy who made, I'm just looking it up here now on Wikipedia, it was made by a Nashville-based filmmaker, Bart Sibrel, and he's a proponent of the conspiracy theory that the Apollo missions were faked between 1969 and 72. And so obviously he watched this movie, Capricorn 1. He must have, because that's the only way he would have got that line. And so, you know, a lot of people are questioning that now. A lot of people are questioning all this stuff of it's going about space. You see Elon Musk now allegedly sending rockets up. You know, I don't think we can get out of here. This wherever we live, whatever, you know, I don't want to be going down flat earth kind of road here now, but it's I don't think we can escape from this. Not escape from it. I think everything is here where we are. And up there is whatever it is, and I don't think we can get there. And it's nice to look up at the stars and the moon and everything. It's you know, particularly on a clear night, it's a beautiful thing to see. But we can't get there. And again, I think it's men trying to become gods. You know, that we can conquer space. We can civilize space, you know. Isn't that what, like, you know, the old empires, like even though the British Empire, we'll conquer the world, you know, we're the best, you know, we can do all of this. And really we're not, we are kind of limited. Yes, we can do some amazing things, but there's certain things that just can't be done. And I think space exploration is one of them. I don't think we can get up there. But anyway, I would say again, I would recommend people who are interested in this, the whole moon landings, the whole space program, NASA and all that, to definitely watch this one, because it is an eye-opener, and it will show you how simple it is to pull off a stunt like this, a complete hoax. And you know, after watching it, then you will question the whole moon landings, because if you still believe that they went to the moon, you will question it after watching this. And as I agree with you, betwixt the last hour or so, it kind of went on a little bit. Yeah, it went from a very interesting first hour into kind of more of a kind of an adventure type of thing, where they were hunting down the astronauts and whatever. But there was a lot of very good moments in it, and it just shows you how the deep state operates, and how they'll do anything to kind of keep control, and how they keep perpetuating the lie, because the lie is what it's all about. Keep lying to people, tell them whatever we want, because then we can control them. And that comes out very much in this movie, I thought. So yeah, I'll give it about, again, a 7.5. Yeah, definitely recommend it. And yeah, back to you.